Sorry, let me just get this thing started.
I hope the clicker works a little bit better with you.
Should I press anything? Just to the right?
Good enough.
All right. All right, so what we've seen and heard so far is intense, emotional, and I'm going to show you numbers. But at the end of this presentation, I hope that you understand that those numbers express some of the emotions that we've seen today. So I work besides the university, at the university, for a group called GAMAAN, the Group for Analyzing and Measuring Attitudes in Iran. And I have to start with providing the context of our work and speak a bit about methodology. Bear with me. I will, however, get to our latest data and present our latest data. Now, a good place to start when talking about GAMAAN is 2020, when my colleague Ammar Maleki and I attempted, in cooperation with Ladan Burumand, to measure Iranian religiosity. Now, prior to that, my research focus was on political secularism in the form of qualitative anthropological research and engagement with political philosophy. So, no numbers. But I saw time and again that researchers of diverse disciplines and even major media refer to institutes such as the World Value Survey, the Pew Research Center, and Gallup, which produced false information about the Iranian population. According to Pew, what you see here, more than 80% of Iran supported Sharia law in the constitution. According to Gallup, the current president, known for his role in mass executions, was astronomically popular. And according to the World Value Survey, based on research conducted in Iran in 2020, 97% of the population self-identified as Muslim. In the meantime, venues such as the New York Times published misleading pieces that claimed, for example, that the majority of Iranian women wear the headscarf by choice. So our first goal was iconoclastic, to smash this image of a religiously and politically homogeneous nation. Now, the hypothesis isn't that the World Value Survey's approach is not scientific. The hypothesis is that they insufficiently accounted for the fact that in Iran, many people experience fear when somebody literally knocks on their door for a survey. Now, given the internet's spectacular growth, we saw an opportunity to organize online surveys, to collect data from different groups, and to try to weight them, to make them as representative as possible in a situation of data scarcity. So in 2019, we had already managed to get 200,000 people to fill out a short survey, which gave us an image of the data we'd collected less, such as samples from regime proponents, women, and people living in rural areas. In 2020, we targeted those groups specifically on social media using Instagram, WhatsApp, and Telegram. In total, 50,000 people answered the questions, around 30 of them, including regime proponents. Our assistants noticed that many remained apprehensive about participating, even if it was anonymous and online. Here's an example of an interaction with an assistant on WhatsApp. Haji, they won't send us to Kahrizak? It's a notorious prison. Ha ha ha, just kidding, but not really, right? So the most important result after weighting the data was secularization. We found secularization amongst all demographic groups, young and old, with and without university education, in rural areas and in the major cities. Around half said to have gone from being religious to non-religious in their lifetime. So it's a change. And even if we look at the results about if we look at the results about the compulsory hijab, then the trend in favor of political secularism is even sharper. More than 70%, that's the bottom total, explicitly disagreed with the hijab being mandatory in Iran. This is 2020. Yes, you can see that young people, women, and those in cities disagree most often with the compulsory hijab, but also people above 50 years old, men, and those who live in rural areas all overwhelmingly said that they disagreed with such theocratic laws. Now, at this point, of course, you're wondering, is it representative? Since 2020, we conducted multiple surveys and tested the extent to which the results can be said to be representative. We started cooperating with the VPN app Siphon, which is a free application that's used in Iran to access blocked websites such as YouTube. So a lot of people use it. For example, prior to the protests in February 2022, Siphon sent our survey link to 620,000 people in 3 days in Iran, across Iran. By collecting data in such different ways, we were able to make regime proponents, women, and also people in rural areas participate. Here, you can see test results from the survey conducted in February 2022. We compared data from Iran about household income levels. As you can see, the income levels are divided in so-called deciles. So on the right, you see it's 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. It's like a scale divided, and household is more than 3 people in Iran, 3 point something. Below weighted sample, that's our result, weighted sample. So after correcting for, are there enough men or women or people from different provinces and so on. That's our result. You see that we have an overrepresentation of the first decile, 23%, it should be 10, right? So there's actually, there's a bias here towards people with low income, okay? The other numbers, you can see that they're all close to 10. So what does this mean? It means that people from all socioeconomic layers are participating in that survey. Now, what about ethnic diversity? We repeatedly compared our survey results with those of Ethnologue, which is an institute that researches the languages of the world. Ethnologue recently conducted research inside Iran and published the results in 2021. You can see Ethnologue's results on the right, and then weighted sample is our final result. As you can see, they had 63% Farsi speakers in Iran. We also had 63%, right? They had 13.6 Azerbaijani Turkic, we had 12.8. They had 5.8 Kurdish, we had 5.6, right? Now, what about testing attitudinal questions? Our hypothesis was that the World Values Survey worked in a rigorous and reliable way, and their results should be valid for politically non-sensitive questions, but invalid in the case of politically sensitive questions. So repeatedly, including February, we asked the same questions as the World Values Survey about the importance of family, friends, work, and religion. Now, as you can see, the results match, except in the case of religion. In the case of religion, we see an extreme discrepancy. Now, we believe, also because the other mentioned tests on household income levels or languages are working, that this discrepancy is not only due to bias inherent in online opt-in surveys, but much more so because of the fact that people, when surveyed on site or called by telephone, are more likely, and certainly before the protest, to give a false response in the Iranian theocratic context. Now, in December, so this December, we conducted a similar survey, this time spreading on social media and through Siphon VPN, as well as, for the first time, satellite television channels, Iran International, Voice of America Persian. And what you see on the screen is our advertisement. We were curious to see what would happen if these television channels would also share the survey. What kind of data would be able to collect? Would we get, for example, more people from rural areas? BBC Persian, which is if you don't know, often accused of bias towards reformists, cited policy as a reason not to cooperate with us. The campaign resulted, so including everything, siphon, social media, everything, resulted in a sample of over 150,000 respondents inside Iran who answered questions about the nationwide protests following the murder of Mahsa Amini. After testing different weighting models, my colleague, Ammar Maleki, was able to generate results that match the external data. So for example, here again, the household income levels. You see that this time, the first decile is 12.8, which is good, right? They're all close to 10, and the last 4 are joined together. It's 37, and that one's 40, right? So again, people of all different kinds of income levels are participating. And here is the distribution of languages, one more time. This time we have a slight bias towards Persian. You see 68, which should be 63, right? But also other languages, Turkish, Kurdish, Arabic, and so on, are sufficiently or almost sufficiently represented. This time, we added one more external check to our repertoire. I love this one. We asked respondents which healthcare insurance they have. So it's not a politically sensitive question. And we compared our results with a poll conducted by ISPA, which is a polling agency of the regime. After sample matching and raking, or what's called weighting, our results almost perfectly matched those of ISPA, even for an insurance of the armed forces. You see that? Armed forces insurance. ISPA, so from the regime, had 3.4%, we had 2.9%. So you see that even the more you have of these external checks, the better, right? The more you can be sure that it's representative. And when we again asked and compared attitudinal questions of the World Values Survey, again we found, at the bottom, a huge discrepancy with religiosity. But we also found a difference in the measured importance of friends. This is fascinating. So in multiple surveys, each time in the last 3 years, we have asked the same questions. But for the first time, we didn't get a match on the question of the importance of friends after the protests, right? The importance of friends has very much increased. So it seems, but this is a bit speculation, that there is a kind of increased sense of brotherhood showing itself in this figure. And there are more of such changes. On the other hand, putting GAMAAN's last 4 surveys next to each other, we find that the percentage of the importance of religion is roughly consistent. It shows that many Iranians do not identify with the concept of religion or do not think religion is or should be very important in their daily lives. Now, for those who've been following the protests, it should be clear that the Iranian population isn't just protesting the compulsory hijab. They are seeking regime change, and they are demanding political secularism. This is consistent in our findings before and after the 2022 protests, but there are some remarkable changes taking place at a rapid pace. The 2022 results, so before the protests, showed that people of all demographic groups disagree with a political system based on religious law. So Iranians are not polarized on this issue. The overwhelming majority is unified in its demand for political secularism. In December 2022, so after the protests, we asked people again if they would vote for the Islamic Republic in a free referendum on Iran's political system. The results do point toward a change in people's attitudes. Well, we found in 2019 around 70% who explicitly said no to the Islamic Republic. This has by now increased to over 80%. And comparing multiple surveys on people's political orientations, we also detected a sharp increase of people who said that they believe regime change should be a precondition for any meaningful changes. So that's the red line that suddenly goes up. That's before and after the protests, right? This sudden increase is the effect of the protests. It's accompanied by a continuing decline of those who believe the Islamic Republic can or should be reformed, and a decline as well of those who still believe in the Islamic Revolution and support the supreme leader. Now, just how angry people are, it's not just about love, right? It's also about anger. Just how angry people are can be observed in a question on transitional justice. We asked in September 2020 and in December 2022 what justice would be should a regime such as the Islamic Republic be overthrown. In the past 2 years, the percentage of those who said they support revolutionary executions of regime officials has doubled, right? That's the top, right? Well, those who support punishments other than the death penalty have declined. Now, when we broke down the demographics, we found that in our latest survey, especially women, people without a university education, and young people supported revolutionary executions. So if you see the very interesting, right, difference in the bottom, you see male, female, and females, they have much more often supported revolutionary executions. Right? I interpret this as a manifestation of their anger and oppression. Okay, so I have to wrap up. More about this research can be read in the latest report, which is available at GAMAAN.com. What I've shown today is accompanied by a massive change in the Persian public discourses, which are normalizing and rehabilitating the concept of inqilab, revolution. My impression is that the West is still lagging behind, that people inside Iran are far more radical in their demands than many Western politicians, journalists, and academics have been long willing to admit. They claim, for instance, that Iranians don't believe the protests can succeed, based on the observation that the number of protests declined or that not enough people have participated in strikes. But our results show a completely different picture, with the overwhelming majority, 67%, expressing the hope that the protests can succeed. And they are asking Western governments to support them, to put the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on the terror list, to stop engaging with the Islamic Republic, and to seriously pressure the regime. How we respond to their hope will co-determine the fate of democratization in Iran. Will we choose hope and justice? Will we be honest about the failed attempts to reform the Islamic Republic? Will we admit that this regime is, to paraphrase one of my favorite philosophers, Thomas Hobbes, a confederacy of deceivers who with their erroneous doctrines extinguish the light of reason? Or will we continue on the so-called path of diplomacy, which is nothing else but dispreparing the world for its first revolution in the name of women, life, and liberty? Whatever we choose, the Iranian people do not want an Islamic Republic, and they will resist, and sooner or later, this regime will have to go. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That is a hopeful message to end our presentation with. There is one guest who has not had the word yet, and he's sitting right next to me. Ulysse Ellian, a member for the parliament, for the Dutch parliament, for the VVD. We are very happy that you are here. You have a personal connection, of course, with the country. We have seen so many things tonight, presentation, performances, music. What resonates the most with you?
You know, I think it's, on the one side, it's hope that we can win. But on the other side, you know, it's pain. It's pain we've been feeling for a long time. You know, it's hard for me to watch the images of when you have a history, when your family has fled from Iran, or when you know people there. These things are not new. I understand for the West it's kind of new, but for us it's not new. We know this. It's a fight we've been on, for like 4 decades. So it's hard for me to watch, but it has to happen now. And I'm very, very happy with the work of. Where did you go, my friend? Pooyan. It's very important because I saw the quote of Jafari. It angers me to my mind. People saying, we don't know if the people of Iran want change. We don't know if they want revolution. What do you think they want? They don't want this regime anymore. So I'm so happy that you've proven this with statistics. Because the debate was always, how can you say this? You have a political interest. No, we know the people want to get rid of the regime. They didn't speak out all the time, which is normal because when you do, you get killed. So so I'm very happy with everything you do. So it's my job as a member. I'm the only. No, there are 2 members of parliament in Holland who have a background in Iran.
Yeah.
So it's my it's my moral duty to do what I can.
And you say this is not new for us. We know these images. We know this fight. What is different this time, in your view?
I think the game changer, of course, it's the revolution of the women. It's led by women. I think that's totally different. And secondly, the world can't. You can't turn your back. Everything is being sent by social media. I think that's also the big difference with the 2009 Green movement. You can't turn your back anymore. You have to watch. It's happening under your eyes, under your nose. So I think, that's a game changer. The Dutch Parliament was one of the first parliaments, I think even the first in Europe, to vote on a motion, on a resolution, to put the IRGC on the terrorist list. Yeah. If you would ask me 7 years ago, I would say, no, good luck, this will... nobody will burn their hands, we say in Holland. Yeah. So things are changing, and because people are seeing day by day what's happening, and and I think a lot of dissidents all over the world speaking out. It's really important. I'm just like this, but people in the US, other people in Europe. The word brotherhood, I think, is very important. We have to be one voice, and there's only one thing we can say: we don't want the Islamic regime, and the key to reaching that, in my opinion, is of course getting rid of the IRGC. If the regime cannot rely on the IRGC, things will change. They are, it's like a murder machine.
Niloofar, I was wondering because Ulysse just said, we are here, we are with a big diaspora all over the world. How is it for you to watch the protest and be here?
I think for the easy answer is that it's unbearable, for all of us, and in the other hand, I kind of envy people who are fighting in the street. I'm not sure if I was in Iran, I was brave enough to go to the street. But anyway, the fact that they are so brave and they're living all their power, it's kind of like I envy them.
And you are a documentary maker. You said it in your speech that you made a documentary about domestic violence. And that didn't go really well in the eyes of the regime. Did you ever, before that moment, think about going away, going out of Iran?
Yeah, of course. I think all young people in Iran, they like to some point immigrate, but I always wanted to see the world and go back to Iran. I never wanted to be disconnected from my country, but at some point we have to.
Yeah. Would you ever go back, you think?
I think yes, I'm quite hopeful. Yeah, but I always was very conscious about my activities that because I always want to go back to Iran, and I was living in fear and very careful about all kinds of activity I'm doing, also in social media. But what this protest did with people, this veil of fear just dropped down, and we don't scare anymore, I think.
Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful
for the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maryam, you have been an activist for decades, I think. You've been waiting for this moment to happen all your life, perhaps, for the revolution to take place. How is it for you to watch?
Well, I mean, I think, I think we all believe that this is the real people of Iran. And it's the Islamic regime that has stopped this wonderful, brave people to really be able to show their dreams and aspirations. And I do think it is a continuation of the 1979 revolution, which I don't think was an Islamic revolution, though everybody calls it Islamic. I think it's very much victors writing history. It's the lion that decides, how history is going to be recalled. And I do think it was a revolution against dictatorship. It was suppressed by an Islamic movement. We have to remember that at the time in '79, it was during the Cold War. It was a time when Islamism was something that US foreign policy used as a tool against the Soviet Union at the time, to create a green belt around the Soviet Union. And now we know all those secret documents have come to light from the Guadeloupe conference, where they decided that they prefer an Islamic state, with Heuser, the general, going to Iran and talking to the army. And so we know that the Islamic movement was, in a sense, pushed on the people of Iran, and it suppressed, it killed entire generations in order to maintain itself. So for me, I feel this is the unfinished business of a revolution against dictatorship and for a different life. And I think it's very hopeful. I think any Iranian in this room knows that many times we've talked about packing our suitcases and going back every time there's some protest that takes place. But I think for the first time, maybe it feels like it's really a possibility that change can really happen. And it's this generation that really is, of course, standing on the backs of many generations who have died for freedom and for equality in that country. But this generation is a generation that is fearless. It is a generation that has always has been brought up with digital portable technology at its very fingertips.
And knows how to use it.
Knows how to use it, and is known. They have, it's not Soraya M. was stoned to death. We know these people who are being killed. We see their social media footprints. And social media, in a sense, is doing to Islam what the printing press has done to Christianity. It's having a huge effect and giving this connection to the world and giving us all hope, I think. But hope, and I think we need hope, because we're living in a world that is so dark, that is so violent, that is so brutal, that to see people rising up against this sort of unbelievably misogynist, unbelievably brutal and violent movement, standing up to it with their bare fists, burning their veils, dancing in the streets, doing everything that is illegal in that country.
Yeah.
It's something that gives us all hope and courage. And the problem is, though, that nothing, no matter how legitimate, how just, is necessarily going to reach victory. It's not a given. It's not guaranteed. If it was guaranteed, then we could all just put our feet up and relax. The point is that how we each intervene in this situation is what will determine its future and its fate. And I think for me, we should all see our reflections in this revolution, because it is really this wonderfully deep and human slogan of woman, life, freedom. The the protest and revolution that we're seeing unfolding on the streets of Iran, it is something that belongs to all of us. So how much are we going to take a stand in its defense? It does depend a lot on us. I'm not talking about Western governments. I have no faith in them. They will keep a dictator for as long as it helps with profit, because profit always comes before human welfare. They have actually, you know, Islamism is a product of US foreign policy during the Cold War. Now, of course, it's a beast on its own, and even the US can't control it. No one can control it. But the fact of the matter is, I'm talking about people-to-people solidarity. It's what has changed the world and what can still change the world if we believe enough that our interventions as individuals, as human beings, whether we're Iranian background or not, can have a huge effect. And that's, I think, what the people of Iran are banking on. That's what we're all banking on. Are we going to be that? Are we going to play the role at this historical juncture that is required of all of us?
Niloofar, you are organizing protests and freedom events in the Netherlands and in Amsterdam. How's that going? Is there a lot of solidarity and support?
Yeah, sometimes like you have this period that it becomes a bit less, but I think in general it's really hopeful, like how people in Europe also are reacting to the protest. And I think it's also the way that Iranians are fighting in social media and the huge knowledge of social media that they had to gain during these last years, because they were forbidden to do anything. So they just were in social media and learning stuff through social media. Yeah. But what they forbidden for people in Iran, it actually became a fighting tool against them now.
Yeah. Ulysse, there has been news lately that the regime is also releasing some people from the prisons, which looks like good news, like some people are being let free. How do we have to see that?
Look, for the individuals who are free, I'm happy for them. Nothing is worse than being in prison. However, we should not be fooled by the regime. They want to show their nice face to the world. But there's still like almost, those are only estimates, like 20,000 people in jail.
Yeah.
One thing I keep saying, I keep emphasizing time and time again, yes, they will set some prisoners free. Look, prisoners, they shouldn't even be in prison. That's the first thing. But secondly, if they want, just with the stroke of a pen, they can sign the death sentence of all of them. So look, because I also heard some politicians in Europe. Look, it's good news, they're setting some people free, and I'm like, no, the only good news is when the mullahs are gone, then it's good news. And the prisons are empty. Then, besides the criminals and all, but that's so we should not be fooled. But the one thing I take some hope from is, I do think they're worried. I think. For the first time, the regime sees, the world is watching. So, yeah, it's a historical moment in time when we all have to play our role. I have to play mine. Everybody can play their own, your own intervention that will decide, the fate of the people. But don't be fooled by these
gestures.
No. Because they can take them, they can arrest them again if they want.
Yeah. I also want to see if there are any questions from the audience, because we've been talking for a very long time. But okay, my assistant Margot will come to you with a microphone so everyone can hear you clearly. I think here on the first row, right? Yeah.
Thank you for your incredibly touching stories. It brought up so many questions to me, and I will.
Try to start with one.
Yes, I will, of course. You mentioned that you have very little faith in Western governments. And I was wondering, how do you see sanctions in the Iranian regime? Putin was not very impressed with them. I don't believe the Iranian regime, as of now, is particularly impressed by them. What else would there be?
Maryam.
Okay, should we
Yeah.
answer? Okay. Well, I mean, I think, look, I think we all know that every right that has been gained, even in the Netherlands, anywhere in the world, is not something that those in power have said, here you go, have some maternity rights, and why don't you have the right to strike? It's been fought for, you know, and I think that also with Western governments, if there's not pressure on them, they will carry on with business as usual. So it's up to citizens to put so much pressure to embarrass and shame them into having continued relations with the regime. And a great example of this is, you know, the apartheid regime of South Africa. Nelson Mandela was called a terrorist by many governments. The South African regime was supported, despite the fact that there was racial apartheid in that country. There's sex apartheid in Iran, and business goes on as usual. And so then there was a time when Nelson Mandela was welcomed, and there was enough pressure to put an end to the apartheid regime. And a lot of that pressure came from outside as well. You know, especially, and now more so, because we live in a global village now, and with social media, we're connected in ways that we were never connected before. And so there's so much more possibility to put that pressure on. Look, the reality is they've got to expel ambassadors from this country. Why does the Islamic regime of Iran have an embassy here, or in Britain, or in Germany? They are criminals. They should be tried in a criminal court rather than having embassies. They should be expelled. Of course, there should be sanctions against them, but real meaningful sanctions, and one that hurts the regime and not the population. You know, and I think the reality is that that's only going to happen with pressure. And that's what we need from people, citizens across the globe. I mean, a great example is the UN Commission on the Status of Women. You know, Iran was a member of the UN Commission. It is the highest body promoting gender equality at the United Nations. Iran was a member of that committee and has been for a long time. And now also Sudan, Saudi Arabia, they're members of the UN Commission on the Status of Women. Iran is the first country to have ever been expelled from that commission. Why? Because of public pressure, not because governments suddenly realized that the Iranian regime is one of the most misogynist states in the world, but because of public pressure. And that public pressure can shut down embassies in these countries, can expel ambassadors, can break ties with the Iranian regime, and can make governments stop supporting and maintaining the Islamic regime. And that's up to all of you. It's not, you know, something that, will you please do this? You have a responsibility to do this. And it is your task today, if you are pro-women's rights, if you are pro-equality, and if you want to see an end of Islamism in this world. This is the beginning of the end of one of the main pillars of Islamism across the globe. If you look at, since the Islamic regime of Iran was established, we have seen the rise of Islamism across the globe. It has wreaked havoc in the lives of so many countless people across the globe, and we've seen a corresponding rise in other religious right movements. So here there are people, citizens, young people, Generation Z, some of them school children, standing up against this regime, being shot at, being arrested. What can you do? You have to ask yourself that question. There's this great Labour song. It says, which side are you on? Which side are you on? The only response anyone can give today is, I am on the side of woman, life, freedom. That is the only ethical, moral response that anyone can give when we see this unfolding revolution in Iran.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for your lovely presentations all. First, I should mention that I don't consider myself a communist. I'm not anti-American per se. I know that Iran is extremely rich in natural resources. And nowadays we have an ever-growing demand amongst the superpowers to get a hold of these resources worldwide in all different countries. With referral to the autobiography that John Perkins wrote, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, how can you be sure that the revolution is not instigated and or fueled by one of the superpowers with another agenda?
Okay,
That's
so
a very good question, but
yeah.
I think you can.
Maybe somebody else will answer, because that just makes me angry, so I can't answer
Yeah.
it. Sorry, you go ahead while I calm down.
You calm down. Well, yeah, look, the main focus here is the freedom of the people. You know, it's not. I think the people, the people in Iran, they want liberty. You know, they want to have fundamental rights like we have in Europe. That's the main thing. You know, and I think the people of Iran are educated enough and smart enough to know what they want, and I don't think they will allow any superpower to, to take that kind of position. You know, let me rephrase the question. If the regime falls, you spoke about this, the whole world will be a safer place. That should be the main focus. It's in the interest of everybody, you know, and all these theories. You know, I think the U.S. government they didn't support the movement in 2009. Nobody did anything. You know, this is the first time in my life I'm seeing some serious interventions. So now you know.
You don't think anyone else is involved? No.
No, look, but with involvement, yes, we have to support the people. But the main thing is the people want to be free. They want their own constitution, a fair constitution. Now that should be that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about intervention of other.
I mean, I think in reality, if you look at superpower intervention, it has been in favor of the Islamic regime of Iran. As I mentioned, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan to an Islamic regime in Iran, it was part of US foreign policy during the Cold War. None of the left, however, talks about how, and I'm on the left myself, let me add, talk about how Islamism is a intervention of superpowers. They would never say that. But Islamism is a revolutionary force, while it's killing and murdering the working class in many of the countries in that region. What interests me is, would the same question be asked if there's a strike here, like there's strikes now in Britain, to save the NHS, to save the privatized railroads that are being destroyed by the Tories? Is there a superpower behind those protests, the strikes, and the nurses wanting more pay, and the teachers demanding respect? Since when do superpowers support the fight for people, for freedoms? They prefer dictatorships. Historically, look at every country that superpowers have intervened in. It's because they prefer dictatorship. Dictatorships is good for profit. Cheap labor, silent labor, one that you can do anything you want with without any of the, very annoying regulations that you have in Europe. So to ask that question really angers me, because if you cannot see that this is a movement that is not linked to superpowers, but it's people demanding the same life you have, how dare you think that they don't deserve the same thing? And the minute that they ask for something that you take for granted, it's superpowers intervening. I mean, it's absurd when you think about it. It's absurd. It's so that you can shrug your responsibility towards this movement in Iran, this revolution. This revolution is going to happen without you, but we also need the support of people, and we need people to support it. Don't worry, the superpowers are busy trying to figure out how they can smash this revolution. They did it in '79, and right now they are very busy trying to organize regime change from above. Don't you worry, they are doing what they need to do. What are you going to do to stop them from doing that and from supporting a people's revolution?
That's a very clear answer. Thank you. Is there maybe one last question before we go to the bar? The word bar is really...
Really
Bar,
yeah.
no more questions.
Okay. Then I will close up. I think we are still in conversation and we can have a drink and talk some more. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for all my guests and for you for listening so attentively. Thank you so much.
Should I press anything? Just to the right? Good enough. All right.